Welcome back, everyone, to Black and Briefed, our history on the ballot. And I am very excited to have today's guest. She is running for governor of my home state, the beautiful Sunshine State of Florida. This is Miss Dayna Foster. She is a Broward County educator, public servant, and candidate for governor of Florida. She began serving her community at 19 through the Broward County Library's African American Research Library and Cultural Center, providing academic tutoring and employment assistance to people from all walks of life. She later earned a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Florida Atlantic University, shout out to FAU, a Master of Science in Finance from Florida International University, and a Master of Science in Information from Florida State University. And I noticed that you are currently, or were you pursuing a bachelor's in political science from FSU as well?
So it's so funny because I actually had to put that on pause because when we talk about the red tape of certain areas of our system, so
Yeah.
due to where I live, I had to put that on pause. And I'd sometimes talk about that in my town halls, but it's one of the many reasons what prompted me to even like run for office in the first place because I'm literally dealing with the systemic barriers that are put in place against us everyday working people.
Absolutely. So Dayna not only talks the talk, she walks the walk. She's getting the education that is needed to truly be a well-rounded candidate as well. And she's doing this all while working full time, you guys. So today she teaches math at her alma mater, Fort Lauderdale High School. If elected, Dayna would be making history as Florida's first Black woman governor. So I'm super excited to have you on the platform, Dayna. Thank you for joining us at Black and Brief.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to give the audience a little bit of a perspective outside of just your platform and what you're running on, who Dayna is. So you are a math teacher. That is not easy, especially in the current educational climate. You're a
Yes.
Broward County native and a first generation college graduate. And now you're running as governor or for governor. Walk me through the moment that this became the natural next step for you and what problem in Florida felt so urgent that you could not just stay on the sidelines.
So, for me, what I've talked about in the past is the elections, right? So in 2024, when we saw Harris versus Trump and Trump won, and that first month of 2025, I think it had only been like a couple of days. It just felt like political vomit consistently. Every single day, something was happening coming out of that White House. And it was exhausting. And so that prompted me to look within in terms of our home in Florida to say, okay, well, what's happening with our elections? Midterms are in 2026. We see right now what's happening, at least federally. This can't happen in Florida again. We hadn't seen a Democratic governor in almost 30 years at that point, because I'm speaking still being in 2025. It was a huge loss that the Democratic Party did not win the presidency. And I knew what was going to happen for Florida and what that meant. Ron DeSantis, for whatever reason, wants to please Donald Trump in every single which way, no matter how many times the man says that he can't stand him. And I knew that Project 2025 was going to become tangible within our state. So when I had did my research and I saw who the alleged frontrunner was for the Democratic Party, for myself as a constituent, I said, absolutely not. We saw this already through with Charlie Crist. The FDP tried to push a former Republican turned Democrat, and they lost terribly. And so as a constituent, I found myself saying, what makes them think that this is going to work again? Mind you, this frontrunner lost their political seat to Charlie Crist once he switched and became a Democrat. So we always talk about in our classes, when we're in school, and we learn about how democracy is a representative process. And I waited a good couple months to see, okay, well, this can't be the only person that's going to run. And I'm going to be honest, I thought I would see Angie Nixon. I thought maybe Anna Eskamani, someone that was more prominent in terms of like a mayor, Donna Deegan, right? And just waiting and waiting to see, okay, who's going to put their name in the hat? Just so that we had options, and no one did. And I remember having a conversation with an old mentor, and she mentioned to me, when I said to her all of what I mentioned to you and my concerns, she said, well, why don't you run? And I was like, I can't run. And she said, absolutely, yes, you can. And so that actually kind of ignited a fire within me, because I said, okay, well, let me go do my research. Because again, democracy is a representative process. We elect people of the people, for the people, by the people. That's the very foundation of the United States of America. And when I saw that the only requirement was an age restriction and a residency restriction, I said, oh, that's it. Let me put my name in the hat. And what started out as wanting to provide a sense of hope for the people of our home, and to let people know that we didn't just have one option, we could have other options. And again, hoping that more people will enter the race. I recorded a video of myself once I got my letter. So I researched, I had to fill out this form, that form, send it up, whole 9 yards. I said, okay. And once I got my letter, I had opened up a PO box and everything. I was like, just in case, let me record this. And I held on to that video for actually about a month. I didn't post it or anything like that. I just held on to it. And I know sometimes religion and politics, it's a little taboo, but God told me to post it. It was about a month and a half after I had recorded it. I posted it. I put the song Tomorrow by Tevin Campbell and Quincy Jones, and it took off. And what it signaled to me was that people want change. People want leaders that are representative of them, not just physically, but also in their lived experiences. Don't talk to me about struggle if you don't know what struggle is. Don't talk to me about systemic barriers if you don't know what that is. Don't talk to me about a woman's right to choose what happens to her body if you don't know what that is. And so, because these, like I said, are rooted experiences in real life, it kind of opened this door to like the actual validity and tangibility of us as a state to say, no, we're going to challenge the system. And so what started out as something of just curiosity and concern for our home turned into, no, this is the moment. This is the momentum. This is the calling. And sometimes, when fate knocks on your door, you can't just leave it unanswered. And so with that being said, it was okay. Now I have to get a team. And the reception from the people was very overwhelming. So I had constituents reaching out to me saying, I just want to help you. And so our team is entirely grassroots. They're just volunteers from all across the state. And I say that because I think that it's very important for it to be put out there that Foster for Florida truly is a campaign of the people. It's not even just myself as the candidate, but even our team. And we are all stepping up to this call of action because we understand what's at stake. And so at the crux of my candidacy is understanding the urgency to have leaders that will bring bold and strong leadership to our state. Because I say it like a broken record, Project 2025 is in full implementation mode and slight facilitation mode because of what's coming down the pike.
So you mentioned some of your opposition on the Democratic side. And again, as a Florida native myself, it was quite telling after the 2018 gubernatorial election, which was a bit heartbreaking. Andrew Gillum lost against Ron DeSantis. And that was probably the first time that I felt very deflated as far as where the state was headed. But then to be followed up by a candidate like Charlie Crist, who, if you grew up in Florida, you remembered that he wasn't a Democrat. You remembered quite vividly that he was a Republican. So it almost was kind of a moment of like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys thinking after such a heartbreaking loss just a few years prior, to then follow it up with this candidate in this moment when we had seen the shift politically nationally? What are you guys thinking? And then kind of seeing the lay of the land again in this election cycle. What do you think the Florida Democratic Party is thinking, and where do you think their priorities lie when it comes to putting forth candidates who are actually going to change the political tides in Florida, the second largest state in the United States?
So let me first say this. 2018, I remember when Andrew Gillum ran, and I remember the hope, right? I was still working at the African American Research Library. He had came to our compound that we shared with Delavo Park, and I didn't get to necessarily meet him, but just to see him and hear him speak. And again, it was, okay, maybe, just maybe, we could get it right. And we almost did, right? The most hairline of hairline differences between two candidates in a race where they had no choice but to do that recount. It was automatically triggered. And it's just it was very disheartening that that happened. And then, yes, we saw with Charlie Crist, and it was like all we had were two Republicans on the ballot, you know? So, what I think is happening as it relates to the Florida Democratic Party, and from, I'll say this, what I've heard from people in positions within the FDP, is that they are more concerned with winning. And that is their first mistake, because their concern should always be with we, the people. And my campaign is very, very much so fixated on the people so much that we are always making sure that we're in tune with the voice and the rhetoric of the constituents of this state. So, for example, I have in my platform 6 key pillars, but a part of my entire platform, I have 13 additional action issues as well. But these first 6 pillars are what I intend to implement, hopefully within the first year or within just the administration that first term, considering, yes, the legislature is Republican led. But it's my promise to Florida. Everything else will have to be within years 2 to 4. But so many people have been very vocal about the environment. And so we have had no choice but to, again, meet the people where they're at. By definition, that's good public administration, right? You're meeting the needs of the people, and you understand that things have to be done in a progressive way, because not every constituent or every local municipality is the same. So there's always a unique approach that you have to take. But again, understanding that the people are the priority. And so should the FDP continue on this path, right, they will lose, because what you cannot do is say, we have to put people above politics, but then you proceed to put party above people, because the people have said, if you're going to push a Democrat, don't push a moderate, don't push a centrist, definitely don't push a former Republican, and don't think that we are gullible or naive or uninformed. This populace right now are absolutely informed, and they know what is at stake. And as detrimental as it sounds, people are willing to sit out of an election if they do not have candidates that they resonate with, that they identify with, that they respect, and that they feel that they can actually vote for because they can trust them. And right now we can see that there are 52.3% of registered Democrats in this state that are still undecided. And they do not know who they're going to vote for. Because right now at the forefront, is David Jolly and Jerry Demings. More people, when they learn about me, they say, wait, I had no idea that you were running. Let me look up your platform. Oh, you're actually going to post a comprehensive agenda of what you plan on implementing? I'll be waiting for that to be published on your website. You definitely either have my interest, my vote, my support. And so when we look at what the people are saying and what they want, again, you have to meet the people where they're at. They can't expect for us to show up for them if they're not going to show up for us.
Absolutely. So I want to get this out of the way very early because I found you through social media. So social media is absolutely working. From what I've been seeing through comments and commentary, you know, one of the litmus tests is whether or not candidates take corporate PAC money. So what is Dayna Marie Foster's position on corporate PAC money? If you will accept corporate PAC money, and should corporate PAC money be a part of our politics at all?
So, number one, we don't accept any kind of funding from corporate, foreign, or special interest groups. So, a lot of people ask me, do you accept APAC? We're like, absolutely not, whether it's myself, my campaign, digital team. And it seems like no matter how many times I say it publicly or I post it on my page, like people still ask about it. But I try to encourage people to look at our state reporting system because technically I input all of that information for our donations. We only accept donations through our Act Blue. And if a constituent does give us cash or check, then of course it's deposited directly into our campaign bank account. But other than that, everything comes through Act Blue. So with using Act Blue, I'm able to have names, addresses, places of employment, and our donations are coming from Florida, all over the state. They're coming from neighboring states in our country like Texas and Georgia, California. I think I saw Virginia a lot in this last quarter for reporting that we had to do. And in terms of like the background of these individuals, whether they're employees at Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or Lowe's, or maybe they are hospital staff, even small business owners, right? It's everyday working people. So that's where our funds come from because we're strictly grassroots. And for the momentum that we are building, the movement that we are leading, the revolution I like to say that we are igniting is that we, the people, hold the power. So the second part of your question, whether or not we should have corporate money within politics, period. Well, the answer is no, because if you think about it, right, the leaders that we elect are supposed to be working for who? We, the people. And so the decisions that they make should be rooted, grounded, and based on our voices, our needs, our wants, right? And if I'm just donating $5 to a campaign, but here we have some corporate PAC that is donating hundreds of thousands to a campaign, who is the candidate more prone or privy to listen to, right? Especially if that type of donation becomes reoccurring. And I remember attending an event with, just as a constituent, through 5051 South Florida, where it was about keeping money out of politics. And again, what do we have to do? Meet the momentum and listen to the voices of the people. And we, the people, have made it very clear that we don't want bought out politicians, right? Shirley Chisholm said that she was unbossed and unbought. We need more of that energy. And that's what we are requiring as a state, as a country, and just as a people.
We are walking into probably one of the most consequential election seasons. And I know that that's been something that has been said over and over and over again, but I think the lay of the land shows that this midterm election is going to be very consequential to the survival, I think, of our democracy as it currently exists. And you are running in a state that seems hell-bent on changing the rules as they go along. The current governor has called a special legislative session for April 20th to redraw Florida's congressional lines in the middle of the decade and without any type of new census data. The 2022 maps already dismantled a majority Black district and broke up the constituency that Al Lawson had represented for years. And now the Florida Supreme Court, packed with appointees by said governor, has upheld those maps. What is actually left to protect Black voting power in Florida? And what does a Governor Foster do to help?
So I think the reality of the situation is just very grim. And I try my best not to sugarcoat anything with the people and just keeping it real. As hopefully the next governor of this state, I tell people all the time, I have this saying that what we're doing is not checkers, it's chess. And me stepping into basically a red mess is being a blockade to ensure that nothing continues to advance. And then B, having reformation. And the way, though, that is only achieved is not just through electing a Democratic governor, but we have to change the House and the Senate as well. It makes it a little bit more difficult, though, right? Because we have this basically looming, impending redistricting and redrawing of the lines that are going to happen. And I don't want to speak on anything preemptively, and I don't like to fearmonger, as some people say. They're very overly critical of Democrats. But what I will say is that no matter what happens, myself and this campaign will ensure that we have some type of contingency and backup plan to protect the people of this state, to make sure that we are able to mobilize and again continue in those efforts of what we call igniting the blue flame across Florida.
So on top of these efforts to redraw maps, we also saw that the governor just signed Florida's own version of the SAVE Act, requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, eliminating student IDs and retirement community IDs at the polls as well. And that takes effect next year. Voting rights groups have already filed suit, arguing it targets older Black voters who grew up in the Jim Crow South, naturalized citizens, and low-income voters. The state's own data found 198 likely non-citizen registrations out of 13 million voters. Whether or not we think it's even is up for debate. What is your response? Right, exactly. What is your response to a law that creates significant barriers for eligible voters to address a problem that amounts to what, point like 0.15 or something like that % of the actual active and registered voters in the state?
So from a nonpartisan standpoint, because I volunteered with the League of Women Voters, and they're very, very active and vocal about voter engagement and civic protections for voters within our state. And this is absolutely clearly a violation of voters' rights. But then you have to also think about the moral aspect of it all too, which is, but why? Right? If we're just keeping it completely a buck, we already have things in place that are supposed to pass at the federal level. There was no need to pass anything at the state level and for Florida to have its own SAVE Act. So then the question becomes, why? I don't have that answer, but it makes you, I want more people to just think about, like, why? When the numbers don't match, the data and the facts do not support their claims. The reason you have to ask yourself, what is the reason? Why? Why is this happening? I know for myself, personally, it has to be one that is rooted in racism, prejudice, and evil. And it's also rooted in ensuring that we are continuing what has happened for decades, which is excluding certain demographics from the voting pool, because once they are included in the voting pool, the other side knows that they will. And I was just at an event on Sunday, and I was asked a question, and my response was, What are they so afraid of? And that's what is actually at the crux of everything that is happening within this state, is that we have people in positions of power that are filled with greed, hate, and negativity. And in addition to that, they want to ensure that it spreads across the entire state because of the inferiority complex that they have.
Now, one of your policy platforms is public education within the state, which Florida has a lot of work to do when it comes to public education. You sit at a very unique advantage talking about this issue because you are currently a math teacher in a public high school. What are you actually seeing inside of Florida schools as a result of curriculum restrictions and lack of funding from the state level? Not necessarily the policy argument, but the daily reality that you are facing as a teacher of the next generation of citizens and leaders in Florida.
Yeah. So, number one is teacher pay, right? I thought it was a slap in the face when it's bragged about how much public education is funded and how much was allocated to teacher salary. And then when it translated to our bank accounts, it was really just like a $20 like increase per paycheck. And when we do so much as educators, it's not just about the lesson planning and the teaching, but it's also other things combined. For myself, I am a math teacher, but my students are not honors or AP students. They are what we call core students. So a lot of my kids don't have math as what we call their first or second language. It's not even a third or fourth. They don't understand it. Then you tie in any behavioral issues or learning disability and having to make sure that my kids have what they need. But then, for example, we don't have the funds, not just at my school or my district, but across the entire state to be able to have the applicable resources so that the kids have a quality public education. So one thing that's abundantly clear across all districts, for example, are like copies. I'm a math teacher. I should be able to liberally make copies for different math worksheets and packets and notes and things of that nature. But then when you're put on a watch, so to speak, for how much you can actually print and told to like slow down, because again, we have to make sure we're saving paper so that other departments can use it, or just the school as a whole. And then ink is very expensive. It's little things like that, right? Our classes are all very full. As a math teacher, teaching ninth graders where math is not their first language, they have behavioral threat assessments, they have IEP plans. Having more than 25 kids in the classroom is not manageable with just one teacher. And so when we see some of our classes exceeding that 25 student cap, or even in other subject areas, and your classes are creeping into 30 or 35, and it's just one of you, it's very overwhelming. And then you have the administrative responsibilities in the sense of you got to meet with your PLC, you have to meet with your department, you have to do your trainings, whether it's online or if it's a specific day where it's like early release or what we call professional study days. You have those trainings you have to do. And then you get into the reports that you have to maintain in terms of filling out documents for the ESC department, parent-teacher conferences, staying in touch with the parents, and then can't you forget about the grading and then updating the grades. And then also the social part of it, or the relational capacity, which is when your kids need you, right? And making sure that you're there for them. And that's not even including what you have to take home, right? Because teaching isn't just those 7.5 hours that you're on campus. Every teacher takes their work home. At least every good educator does. And so it's disrespectful when we're not compensated appropriately. And then on top of it, we're asked to do the impossible, it feels like, every single day. Then you don't have the necessary funds across districts, and then sometimes leaders have to make decisions that aren't really in the best interest of faculty and staff. But again, if you're put between a rock and a hard place, what can we expect them to do? And when we talk about the kids themselves, right, they feel it. And sometimes they ask, why isn't lunch free? Why do I have to pay $4 or $5 for lunch? At that point, I might as well go to McDonald's and get, you know, but this is what's coming from the youth. And when we look at some of the policies that have been implemented within public education, when we talk about instruction, or like I mentioned before, relational capacity. So, number one, there are things that you can't teach, whether it's critical race theory or even using woke. So that affects my social studies counterparts. Then when we have Don't Say Gay and other legislation within the state, and I have kids, even this current school year, that they identify as being trans, but I'm not able to respect their autonomy without written consent from their parents. And then you have to tell this to a child. And then it's, well, my parents don't know yet. So then they have to sit in a classroom and be called a name and pronouns that they don't identify with. And then we're supposed to expect them to learn and be comfortable and retain the information when they are literally made to feel uncomfortable. We have our book bans. You go into any media center, it seems like they're empty because it seems left and right. Book ban complaints from anonymous sources are coming through challenging books, and then they get banned, and then they have to be removed from the shelves. And to bring it back around to the state government, and one thing that irritates me so much, but it's something that I have talked about in town halls, that it will be one of my first decisions or first actions that I take as governor of Florida, is the Department of Education and their board. And the fact that they voted to adopt the Phoenix Declaration to amend the curriculum within public schools in our state, which is a direct directive from Project 2025. When, as educators, it is our job to ensure that we're teaching our future leaders of tomorrow in the most equitable and inclusive way possible, so that they are aware of the entire scope of information and knowledge, so that they have that power. But instead, this declaration limits their knowledge and furthermore creates ethical misconduct, because we are not just teaching one political ideology, but we're also indoctrinating our kids, and that is not okay. And so for those members on the board, I absolutely will make sure that they are suspended and removed from the Board of Education on the grounds of ethical misconduct, because they put the children and the students of this state in a compromising position where we are literally chipping away at their future and their possibility for opportunity to be successful.
Now, can you clarify for the audience, those who may not know, what the Phoenix Declaration is and what it was designed to accomplish within public school education?
So my knowledge of the Phoenix Declaration is, it's basically the curriculum that would be taught at our public schools. And for a lack of better wording, it's putting a certain, how do I say this without, it's putting a certain demographic at the forefront that is excluding DEI and anything that is Black and brown from our classrooms and our history and everything in between.
So on that note too, we're seeing a shift, not just from K through 12 education, but we're seeing a very radical shift in higher education as well. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Florida Board of Governors voted to remove the introduction to sociology from general education requirements across all 12 public universities. As a sociology major myself, my Bachelor of Science is in sociology. I was baffled when I read this news. And this goes into effect next academic year. The chancellor said, and I quote, that social and political advocacy is dressed in the regalia of the academy. The state-approved replacement textbooks had already stripped out entire units on race, ethnicity, gender, global inequality, and the government-led genocide of Native Americans. Faculty noted it could disadvantage pre-med students preparing for the MCAT, which tests sociological concepts, as sociology is the study of how people think in groups. So, what is happening on Florida's university campuses? And what does a Governor Foster do to reverse the damage that is being caused by the stripping of what it seems like to be humanities and free thought within higher education?
Yeah. I often talk about how we're in a humanity crisis or a humanitarian crisis, but even to take that a step further, which kind of coming off of the coattails of the Phoenix Declaration, it's literally just stripping every layer of diversity from whatever platform that they possibly can. And on the college campuses, from when I've talked to the students, it's hard for them to just even be young because they have a totally different reality that they have to live under, and they have different concerns than some of us that had college experiences 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where it was more rooted in opportunity of freedom and independence and self-discovery. And now it's more of like, no, I have to literally fight for my freedoms and protect democracy instead of like having that traditional college experience. I remember visiting the University of Florida and seeing how their Office of Student Engagement was like literally empty. And the offices within student engagement that were for student identity or maybe LGBTQ initiatives and anything in between had been removed. And so what we are seeing, which has been decades in the making, is the resurgence of a certain entity that we thought was gone because we didn't see them in certain cloaks and hoods walking through the streets of our communities. But what did they do? They repositioned. They repositioned, and we didn't have anything in place to make sure that should that had happened, we knew what we needed to do to make sure that it didn't advance. And now here we are, stuck in a mess. So at the state level, what I intend to do, and right now within our campaign and being just kind of in this season of elections, I am closely monitoring the AG race, the Attorney General's race, because as governor, I will always make sure that I'm abiding and not overstepping my role as governor. I'm going to follow the law. But like I said before, this is chess, this is not checkers. And so a lot of the legality and the litigation that is necessary to bring some of the solutions and the reformation and also the accountability that we need will come from that office. And so in lieu of waiting for the legislature to turn blue, God willing, because, you know, it's always something. It's always something. And just when I thought, okay, no, with the whole redistricting thing, like, but no, it's happening. So right now we are just waiting just to see things unfold. And just like how this one organization repositioned, we are also going to reposition. So we have our agenda for Project 2027, Blue Flame Edition, to make sure that we're mitigating against these things that are happening within our state.
Meeting people where they are based on their priorities. For those that maybe don't resonate as much with the DEI and
Mhm.
inclusivity argument, what do we think the long-term effects will be from an economic standpoint for the state when it comes to bringing in students into our higher education institutions, or even families that maybe want to move into the state, but they have, again, children. So there's a concern for public education. What are the long-term economic impacts of these type of rollbacks on Florida's future?
So right now, what I've actually noticed in terms of the data is that a lot of people are leaving. And when people leave, that affects our economy. So whether we have small business owners that are leaving and going to a different state, or they're having to go out of business, whether it's parents pulling their students out of public schools and placing them in charter schools or private schools. So, number one, the economy is affected, right? Because if we don't have money that's being funneled into our state, that affects our state budget. That affects the revenue that I have to work with to be able to allocate to certain state agencies so that we have these social programs and these resources for constituents on a macro scale. Then, when we talk about public education, for example, specifically, and taking students out of public education schools and putting them into charter schools and private schools, this is what we're currently living through, like right now, which is districts having to, again, be stuck between a rock and a hard place to reevaluate and reassess their makeup of different locations for elementary, middle, and high schools, see which ones are low performing, and closing those schools down when, for example, maybe they are located in an inner city where they are a pillar of the community, because parents have to work, whether it's a single parent household or a two-parent household, but they're working hours where they're not able to pick up their kids from school. So they're relying on after school care, or they're relying on the extracurriculars that high schools, for example, provide, so that their student is there at least until 5 or 6 p.m. And then I can go get my student, bring them home, give them dinner, and so on and so forth. Some schools offer free breakfast. Again, if we're in a community where the school is a pillar and then you shut it down because of the issue of funding and because of the lack of bodies that are in a classroom and because it's an expense now, and not looking at the importance of the institution itself and what it means to the community, now what are you doing? You're displacing families in the sense of taking away the resources that are there to help mitigate the realities in which they live in.
So you touched on it just a while ago, and I want to kind of delve a little deeper into the economic impacts of some of the legislation and things that have been being pushed in the state of Florida. And you mentioned that a lot of people are moving out of the state, right? That there has been a bit of an exodus. One
Yes.
of the reasons that I know I have personally heard is just the cost of living. And specifically, one of the biggest areas of concern is the insurance crisis in the state. Florida, of course, is a hurricane prone state, and we have watched over at least the last 5 years several major home insurance companies pull out of the state. So it is creating a crisis where homeowners are not able to get adequate insurance coverage, partially also because Florida created a monopoly within the industry. And we have watched this governor also sign legislation that has made it harder for insureds to get covered by their insurance companies. What is the compounding impact on wealth in a state where people cannot fully enjoy the benefits that come with home ownership, which is such a huge staple of economic gain and wealth in this country?
So when you think about it, insurance is expensive. But again, when we think about it from just the economic standpoint, right? Just basic economics. Like you said, there's a monopoly. So that means there's a shortage on supply, but the demand is high. So what's going to happen? The price is going to go up. Now, I know that there was reform that took place in 2023. It has gone into effect in 2026 through, I believe it's the insurance commissioner. But even then, there are some gaps, we'll call it, within that reform. And so on the front end, because I know I even benefited from it, where it gave rebates, so to speak, back to some constituents, but it still doesn't negate the pressure that the people of Florida are living under. And so what we have to ensure is that when reform is done, it's done, though, in an equitable way so that as many Floridians are able to feel those effects, right? Then when we talk about homeowners insurance, again, we have to make sure that we are opening up the pool so that there's a diversity, there is that supply in providers so that the demand then is addressed, it goes down, and then what happens? Price also goes down, so the premiums go down. Again, just basic econ 101. The other thing that we also have to look into and take into effect is some of the homes within our state. And this is just because of the current environment and the climate in which we live in, because climate change is real, no matter how much Republicans try to say that it's not. When you have a home that is located in a flood-prone area, that's automatically high risk. That being high risk means that your insurance premium is going to be expensive. Then you have your mortgage you have to pay. Then maybe you might even have an HOA and other expenses. And so again, what the state has to do is we have to make sure that the reformation is done in the most equitable and inclusive way possible. It can't just benefit some of Florida. It has to benefit most, if not all.
With that said, I know that there's a huge housing issue in South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Black families are being pushed out of neighborhoods that they built. Now, your campaign supports expanding affordable housing and strengthening tenant protections. When those goals may collide with corporate interests, developers, and local governments resist it due to density, how do you resolve that tension from the governor's mansion?
So a lot of what we intend to do, it's very ambitious, but at the same time, it is very respectful to home rule. I have been very vocal about respecting local municipalities and them enacting what they feel is best for their constituents. I firmly believe that the governor's office and the state government should be a guide. It should be a supporting role. It should address things in a macro way, and the municipalities should address things in a micro way, because no two cities are the same. No two counties are the same. But what we also have to make sure is we're putting people above, like we said, politics and party at the beginning of this interview, which is we have to listen to the issues, which is that people are saying that we don't have enough supply as it relates to housing, whether it's apartments, whether it's homes. And so if the local government is not able to address it, then the state has no choice but to address it. Because again, who is this all about? The people. And so I think through meaningful meetings, conferences, dialogues, making sure that we're educating everyone involved on what our goals are. Does compromise maybe potentially have to be put on the table? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, the priority always has to be the people.
Now, on the topic of affordability, supply and demand, we also have to acknowledge the fact that wages have not increased with the increase of the cost of living. Your platform supports raising the minimum wage, but there's an argument to be made that Florida already has a schedule to increase that we're already on a path to increase the minimum wage. What does Governor Foster do differently? What does your platform envision differently for the minimum wage in the state that is not already being met currently?
So the minimum wage has been increased by I think it's $1 or so over the last few years until it reaches $15. But in terms of the current economy that we're living in, $15 is not enough. And again, we have to ensure that we're showing up for the people of Florida the way that they deserve. So we absolutely intend on increasing the minimum wage. And the way that we intend on not just increasing the minimum wage, but even having the funds to actually enact our comprehensive agenda is through a corporate tax increase. Even if it's by 2%, that opens up the funding pool to be able to have the necessary monies to allocate to different agencies so that we can ensure that the people of Florida are given a fair shot to be able to thrive within the state, to hopefully bring back people home. Because like we said before, they're leaving. And to also invite our neighbors, whether it's of America or internationally, because a huge driver of our state budget is the revenue that we are able to collect through tourism. We're Florida. We have amazing beaches. We have Disney World, we have Universals, like people want to come here and vacation here. But if we don't have the legislation that makes them feel comfortable, or it makes them feel that they're being put in harm's way, they're not going to come. And then again, what happens? It affects our budget. And how in affecting the budget means that it affects our agencies. And if that happens, then it's affecting our municipalities. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, it's harming the people of this state.
So one of the other big facets of the Florida economy is agriculture as well. And I think that we have seen agriculture in the state take a turn for the worse for multiple reasons, including the radicalization of immigration enforcement within the state. And Governor DeSantis has taken a very firm stance on his support of ICE. We see ICE facilities opening up all across the state. Florida was unfortunately the home of alligator Alcatraz. And coming from South Florida, we know that there is a large immigrant community within that Tri-County area. What is your stance on ICE? Is ICE beneficial at all? Does it serve any type of benefit to society, to the economy? And how do we balance the very real priority of immigration policy and reform against the idea that immigration has now become a criminal issue over what it was originally intended to be, which is a civil issue?
So immigration absolutely is a civil issue. It should have never been morphed into what it's become today. I do not support ICE, and I've been very vocal about that. And I do support congressional representatives and senators voting in favor to abolish ICE. We need a better, more streamlined process to having a pathway to citizenship for our immigrants that come to this country for economic opportunity and a better life. My family came to this country from the island of Jamaica to have that opportunity. My grandmother believed in the American dream. She didn't necessarily get to see it realized, but there's a promise within our country that so many people want to be able to attain, and that is the source of their motivation for coming here. So when we try to criminalize the masses because of a small pool, so to speak, right? No one's perfect, And while, yes, could there be some bad apples in the bunch? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that you weaponize and criminalize a process to carry out your personal agenda or your political agenda. And I visited Alligator Alcatraz. I think to this date, I might be the only gubernatorial candidate who has visited Alligator Alcatraz or any detention center. Of course, I'm not able to go inside because I'm not a representative of any government. But even just being at the front and being there in solidarity with the people, protesting peacefully, and seeing constituents drive by, popping champagne bottles in front of it like it's some monument, taking pictures, saying to people that are there, go back to your country. This is the reality that we're living in. And so for the life of me, I will never understand why this federal administration thinks that we need to fund DHS so that ICE can be funded to carry out whatever agenda that they have. But ICE has got to go. And like I said, we have to have a more streamlined process. And at least in Florida, should Florida elect me to be its next governor, we have every intention to make sure that we are helping our immigrant community on that journey to achieve citizenship, because it is a federal issue. And so one thing that we, for example, want to ensure is that immigrants have state issued IDs, right? There might be some problems in terms of the legalities of them having a driver's license, but at least having a state issued ID, making sure that our immigrant population are able to attend our school systems without any type of prejudice, making sure that they have access to health care. A lot of times, and it's not even just the immigrant population, it's even some of our marginalized communities too, where they don't access the doctor because they don't have that access, right? Because of what's in place or the lack thereof as it relates to the infrastructure within our state. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, for lack of better wording, but I'm up for it and I'm up for the challenge. And like I said, we have a plan. We just understand what we need in order for that plan to come to fruition.
Now, you are a teacher. You have been a public servant. You're a first-generation college graduate, and you're asking Florida to trust you with the highest office in the state. This governing thing is very different from any other hat that you have worn up until this point. And the reality is that some people's criticism may be, well, she should run for some other public office. She should maybe run for a council position or something like that. Give herself some time. And you are running against two Democratic candidates who have slightly more name recognition, have slightly more of a political reputation than you do. What do you tell the citizens of Florida who may be sitting on the fence, that 52% or so that are not sure who they will vote for, that differentiates you from the technically, I guess, two front runners on the Democratic ticket for governor? What do you tell those voters about what makes you different?
What makes me different is that I'm not a politician. I can't be bought. I can't be bossed. I'm not an establishment Democrat, and I'm not a career politician at that. I'm a public servant. And what we have actually seen, not just across the nation, but across our state, are the very people of our home voting in local elections for public servants to take public office. To the people that are undecided, it is time that we take back our democracy. Me running for governor is to send a loud and clear message to those in power that democracy will always lie, the power of it, in the hands of we the people. In addition, we want leaders that are going to stand 10 toes and provide that bold, fearless leadership that we absolutely need, but bringing forth policy that is practical, it's tangible, and it makes sense, where we'll have a leader who can outline a state budget, ensuring that the necessary agencies are funded appropriately and correctly, so that, again, we, the people, are being protected. I understand the apprehension, but I'm literally in the trenches with every 23.7 million Floridians who call this state. And so to deal with public policy, because as an educator, as someone who used to work in public libraries, where all I've ever done is serve my community, and I've also seen public policy as an end result, it is absolutely applicable to now end the reign of the career politician, place a public servant within the governor's office to put public service back into public office, because that is the default of public service in politics. And then from there, ensuring that the policies at the beginning translate to what they need to be at the end, so that we have the meaningful change that we also desperately need, so that we have the economic opportunity, so that we have affordable housing for both renters and homeowners, so that we have processes in place for our immigrant communities, so that we're helping to streamline that process to citizenship, so that we have gun reformation within this state. Literally this week is the anniversary of the tragedy that just happened at FSU, so that we're protecting our public schools because they are pillars of our community. Public dollars belong in public schools. This is our home. And what we see right now is that politicians are not going to look out for us. So now it's time that we look out for ourselves.
You started this conversation talking about how the 2024 election is really what kind of radicalized you and pushed you into this moment. In 2024, 92% of Black women and about 78% of Black men voted for a different outcome. Since then, a lot of people have watched the political safeguards that they thought would protect them fall apart. They have watched a party that they have identified with, fundraised for, voted for, kind of fail to meet the moment. What do you tell the voters who are cynical, who feel like participating in this process is of no benefit to them, that politics will always politic as usual? What do you tell them about this midterm election to get them out one more time in an effort to save the shell of the democracy that we may still have left, and ultimately to change the tide in Florida?
Don't give up. Do not give up. There are people that came before us that fought so hard to ensure that we had equity, that we were included in the equation, that we had seats at tables that we were excluded from for decades. Do not give up. I was proudly a part of that 92% that showed up the way that we needed to. We did the thing in 2024. Unfortunately, we had other groups that didn't match our energy. As a society, as a culture, as a community, I get it. Some people sat out. They're like, I can't. This is too much. I get that. But now it's time to come back in. Do not give up. We have to continue the fight of our ancestors and those who came before us. I know for myself, I've been very vocal about my generation as millennials and the baton that was passed to us by of those who came before us, and we didn't take it. We thought that what we learned about in our textbooks were confined to just our textbooks. That fire, that grit, when we see leaders from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and all that they fought for, we didn't continue that. But we have an opportunity to continue. The battle's going to be long, hard, difficult. It's not going to be won immediately. It's probably going to be in series, but we cannot give.
Right. This is Dayna Marie Foster, candidate for governor of Florida. Dayna, where can people find you? How can they support your campaign? And what are the important dates that Florida voters need to know?
So primary elections are August 18th. Usually a week or two before, you'll have early voting that takes place. You can register to vote at registertovoteflorida.gov or check your voter's registration. I think that a lot of Floridians need to know that in order to participate within the primary voting that happens in August, you have to have selected a political party. Florida, for now, is a two-party voting system. You have to either be a Democrat or a Republican in order to participate in the primary elections this August. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X. I think we just got on Threads, but it's Foster for Florida. The only one that has the number 4 is X. So it's Foster 4 and then Florida. Our website is foster4florida.com, and the link to our Act Blue is right on our website. You just click on donate and it'll take you to our Act Blue page. My call to action to Florida is this: we're strictly grassroots. So our competition is outspending us probably like 1,000 to 1. But for me, that's okay because this is not about the money. This is about the movement. It's about the message. It's about the change. It's about the reformation. And I will say this because I think it's important for people to hear this on the record. We are not positioned or aligned necessarily with the blue wave, as they call it here in Florida. We are igniting the blue flame. And if you are looking for something different than what the Florida Democratic Party is offering us, then Foster for Florida is for you.
Dayna, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to the Black and Briefed audience, to share your platform. And I hope that you run a campaign that you are proud of, that Floridians will be proud of. And I really hope to see the tides change in my home state.
Thank you. Me too. I'm ready to see the igniting of the blue flame everywhere. I tell people this summer is about to be hot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Dayna.
Thank you.